Have you ever had your heart ripped out by the two people you trusted most in this world? I'm Aurora, and 3 months before my wedding, I caught my fiancé in bed with my own sister. She thought she'd won the ultimate prize, a wealthy, handsome heir to a billion-dollar empire. She paraded her stolen victory, expecting me to crumble into dust. But she underestimated my strength, and more importantly, she underestimated him, because while she was busy stealing a weak, spoiled boy, I accidentally captured the heart of the one man who controlled everything, his father. The rain was falling in relentless, heavy sheets against the windshield of my taxi, mirroring the exhaustion settling into my bones. I had returned home 2 days early from a grueling architectural conference in Dubai, my mind buzzing with the anticipation of surprising Julian Lombardi. The name alone carried weight in our city. He was the golden boy, the heir apparent to the Lombardi syndicate, a family whose legitimate real estate empire was an open secret covering a much darker, far more dangerous underworld legacy. But to me, Julian was just the man I loved, the man I was supposed to marry in 90 days. I unlocked the door to our shared penthouse, slipping off my heels so I wouldn't wake him. The apartment was enveloped in a suffocating silence, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the city below. But as I stepped into the foyer, my senses were immediately assaulted by something that didn't belong. It was a fragrance sickeningly sweet, laced with heavy notes of vanilla and synthetic jasmine. It was a scent I had known my entire life. It was my younger sister, Chloe's, signature perfume. My heart did a strange, agonizing flutter. Chloe and I had never been close. She was the family's tempest, a girl who measured her self-worth by what she could take from others. If I got a promotion, she suddenly needed a loan. If I bought a dress, she bought the same one in a flashier color. But surely, there were lines even Chloe wouldn't cross. I moved down the hallway, the thick Persian runner absorbing my footsteps. As I neared the master bedroom, the door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of golden light spilling onto the hardwood floor. Then, I heard it, a soft, breathless giggle, followed by the deep, familiar murmur of Julian's voice. "You shouldn't be here, Chloe," Julian whispered, though his tone held no resistance. "Oh, stop worrying about Aurora," my sister's voice purred, dripping with venomous satisfaction. "She's too busy playing the dutiful career woman. She doesn't know how to treat a real man. Not like I do." I pushed the door open. The scene before me was something violently carved out of a nightmare. The silk sheets, the ones we had picked out together for our bridal registry, were tangled around them. The sheer audacity of the betrayal paralyzed me for a fraction of a second. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. A strange glacial calm washed over me, freezing the tears before they could even form. "Well," I said, my voice cutting through the heavy air like a scythe, "at least you took your shoes off before ruining my sheets, Chloe." Julian bolted upright, his face draining of all color. He scrambled for the duvet, looking like a cornered rat. "Aurora, it's not what it looks like. I swear, it just happened. I was drunk." She came over. "Save the cliches, Julian," I interrupted, walking slowly to the vanity. I looked at Chloe, who was pulling a sheet over her chest. She didn't look remorseful. Beneath her fake shock, her eyes glinted with a twisted, victorious pride. She had finally taken the one thing I valued most. "I always knew you liked my leftovers, Chloe," I said softly, picking up the velvet box that held my engagement ring. "But I never thought you'd stoop to digging through the trash." Chloe's face flashed red with anger. "Don't act so high and mighty, Aurora. He chose me. He loves me. Then you can keep him," I replied, my voice steady. I turned to Julian, who was pathetic in his panic, sputtering apologies that meant absolutely nothing. "You have until tomorrow to pack your things and get out of my apartment. Don't leave a single trace of yourselves behind." I didn't wait for a response. I walked out, the heavy emerald-cut diamond ring cold in my pocket. I wasn't going to let them see me break. I had too much dignity for that. But as I rode the elevator down to the damp city streets, a new resolve began to harden inside me. I wasn't going to keep the ring, and I certainly wasn't going to return it to Julian. I was going to return it to the man who had actually paid for it, the man who truly owned the Lombardi name. The Lombardi estate was located on the absolute peak of the city's most exclusive mountain ridge, a sprawling fortress of black marble, wrought iron, and tinted glass. It looked less like a home and more like a citadel, an imposing reflection of the man who resided within, Nico Lombardi. Nico was a phantom in the high society circles, a man whose name was whispered with a potent mixture of reverence and sheer terror. He had taken over the family business at the age of 22 after his own father was assassinated. He was ruthless, calculating, and operated by an archaic, unbreakable code of honor. He had Julian young, raising the boy after Julian's mother passed away. But where Nico was a wolf of the highest order, Julian had grown up to be a pampered lapdog, spoiled by the vast wealth his father had accumulated in the shadows. The heavy iron gates parted with a low mechanical groan as my town car pulled up. Armed guards flanked the entrance, their eyes scanning me with professional apathy. I stepped out into the crisp morning air, dressed in a sharp, tailored black suit. I wasn't here to mourn a relationship. I was here to close a business transaction. I was escorted into a massive library that smelled of aged leather, expensive bourbon, and imported tobacco. Behind an expansive mahogany desk sat Nico Lombardi. He was 46, but the silver dusting his temples only added to his striking, predatory elegance. His dark eyes, sharp as obsidian, locked onto me as I entered. He didn't stand. He simply observed me, a lit cigar resting between his fingers. Aurora, his voice was a deep, resonant baritone that commanded absolute authority. To what do I owe the pleasure of an unannounced visit? Julian isn't here. I know, I said, walking right up to the edge of his desk. I stood tall, refusing to let the intimidating aura of the room shrink me. I didn't come to see Julian. I came to see you, Mr. Lombardi. I reached into my blazer, pulling out the velvet box. I set it down on the desk with a quiet, definitive click. Nico glanced at the box, then back up at me. His thick eyebrows drew together in a slight, dangerous frown. Explain. Your son and my sister are currently occupying my bed, I said, the words crisp and devoid of emotion. The wedding is canceled. I wanted to return the ring to you directly. I know Julian didn't pay for it, and I refuse to keep a Lombardi family heirloom. For a long moment, the room was so silent, I could hear the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Nico didn't explode in anger. He didn't apologize for his son. He picked up the box, opened it, and stared at the flawless 5-carat diamond. Then, he let out a low, rough exhale of smoke. He is a fool, Nico said quietly. The disappointment in his voice was palpable. A heavy, suffocating thing. I raised an air. But it seems I cultivated a coward. And a disloyal one at that. That is between you and him, I replied. I just wanted a clean break. No lawyers, no dramatic public fallout. Just this. I turned to leave, my mission accomplished. But before I could take 3 steps, Nico's voice stopped me. Sit down, Aurora. It wasn't a request. It was a command. I hesitated, then turned back, taking a seat in the leather wingback chair opposite his desk. Nico leaned forward, the shadows of the room contouring the sharp, handsome lines of his jaw. You walk in here, discover your life is in ruins, and you hand over a $3 million ring without asking for a dime in compensation. Most women would have run to the press or demanded a payoff for their silence, Nico analyzed, his dark eyes analyzing me like a complex blueprint. You have dignity. It is a rare currency in my world. I make my own money, Mr. Lombardi. I don't need yours. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was a dangerous, thrilling expression. Call me Nico. And as of this moment, my son is dead to me. He has shamed our name. But you are owed a debt, Aurora. The Lombardi family does not leave debts unpaid. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, you have my word. I looked into the eyes of the city's most dangerous man, and for the first time in 24 hours, I felt entirely safe. I don't need your protection, Nico. Perhaps, he murmured, his gaze dropping briefly to my lips before rising back to my eyes. But you have it anyway. The fallout was swift and incredibly messy. True to his nature, Julian didn't accept the breakup with grace. Within weeks, he and Chloe began parading their relationship across social media, painting a narrative where I was the cold, career-obsessed woman who had driven him into the loving, warm arms of my sister. My parents, eager to maintain ties to the Lombardi fortune, shockingly took Chloe's side, urging me to forgive and forget so the family wouldn't be embarrassed. I cut them all off. I changed my number, threw myself into my architectural firm, and focused on rebuilding my peace. But Nico Lombardi had not forgotten his promise. A month after our meeting, his sleek black Rolls-Royce pulled up outside my office building just as the evening rain began to fall. His driver, a hulking man named Marco, held open an umbrella and handed me a thick, wax-sealed envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. Dinner, the Continental. 8 p.m. N. I could have said no. I should have said no. Getting entangled with a mafia boss was a recipe for disaster, but curiosity and an undeniable magnetic pull won out. I wore a crimson silk dress that clung to my curves, pairing it with my sharpest stilettos. If I was going to dine with the devil, I was going to look immaculate doing it. Nico had rented out the entire top floor of the restaurant. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, a glass of whiskey in hand. When he turned to see me, a spark of pure, unadulterated hunger flashed in his eyes before he quickly masked it with his usual stoic composure. "You look breathtaking, Aurora," he said, stepping forward to pull out my chair. The scent of his cologne, sandalwood, smoke, and something undeniably masculine sent a shiver down my spine. "And you look like a man plotting a war," I observed, taking my seat. He chuckled, a rich, dark sound, perceptive as always. "I am, in fact. I have officially frozen Julian's trust funds and stripped him of his executive titles within my legitimate corporations. He is currently scrambling to figure out how to pay for your sister's exorbitant lifestyle." A vindictive thrill shot through me, but I kept my face neutral. "Why are you telling me this?" "It's family business." "Because it concerns you." Nico leaned across the table, his presence overwhelmingly powerful. Julian was supposed to head my new downtown development project, a $3 billion commercial hub. With him out, the board is nervous. I need a new lead architect and project director. Someone with impeccable credentials, a spine of steel, and a reputation beyond reproach. I stared at him, my heart hammering. "You want me to take Julian's job." "I want you to take the job you are infinitely more qualified for," Nico corrected smoothly. "Julian was a nepotism hire. You built your firm from the ground up. I want your vision, Aurora, and frankly, I want an excuse to see you more often." The admission hung in the air, heavy and intoxicating. I looked into his eyes, searching for deceit, but found only raw honesty. Julian had always made me feel small, like a pretty accessory on his arm. Nico, however, looked at me like an equal, like a queen, meant to rule an empire. "Working for you means entering your world, Nico," I warned softly. "Your real world. I'm not naive. I know what the Lombardi name truly represents in the dark." Nico reached across the table, his large, calloused hand gently covering mine. The heat of his touch was electric. "My world is violent, Aurora. It is unforgiving, but I would burn it to the ash before I let a single spark touch you. Come work with me. Build an empire with me." I didn't break eye contact. Slowly, I turned my hand over, lacing my fingers through his. "Where do I sign?" 6 months later, the social event of the season arrived. Chloe and Julian were hosting a massive engagement gala at the Grand Plaza Hotel. Despite Julian being cut off from the main family funds, Chloe had managed to squeeze every last penny out of his personal savings, insisting on an event that rivaled a royal wedding. It was a desperate PR move, a way for Julian to signal to the underworld and the business elite that he was still a player, even without his father's backing. My invitation arrived in the mail, a petty, spiteful gesture from Chloe, meant to rub my nose in her triumph. She expected me to stay home and cry. Instead, I spent the afternoon preparing for war. I arrived at the Grand Plaza at exactly 9 o'clock. The ballroom was a sea of crystal chandeliers, white roses, and the city's elite dripping in diamonds. I wore a custom-made backless gown of midnight blue that sparkled like the night sky. The slit ran high up my thigh, and my hair was swept into an elegant, commanding updo. But the real statement wasn't my dress. It was the man walking beside me. Nico Lombardi stepped into the ballroom, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back. He wore a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, looking every inch the lethal, undeniable king of the city. The moment we crossed the threshold, the ambient chatter in the room died instantly. The orchestra seemed to falter. The sea of guests parted before us like the Red Sea. Everyone knew who Nico was, and everyone knew who I was. Seeing us together was a seismic shock to the social hierarchy. Across the room, standing by an extravagant ice sculpture, were Chloe and Julian. Chloe was wrapped in a gaudy, overly flounced white gown, a diamond tiara perched on her head. Julian looked arrogant until his eyes met his father's. In a split second, Julian's smirk shattered, replaced by raw, visceral terror. Chloe, noticing the shift in the room, followed Julian's gaze. When she saw me, her jaw practically unhinged. She gripped Julian's arm, whispering frantically, but Julian was frozen. Nico guided me across the floor, our steps perfectly synchronized. The tension was so thick it could be carved with a knife. When we finally stopped a few feet from the happy couple, the silence was deafening. "Father," Julian choked out, his voice cracking. You actually came." "I am not here for you, Julian," Nico said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent room. "I am here escorting my partner, both in business and in life." He smoothly lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Chloe looked like she was about to faint. Her face turned a sickly shade of green as she stared at me, then at the older, infinitely more powerful man beside me. "Aurora?" Chloe stammered, her voice shrill with disbelief. "What is this? This is a sick joke. You're with his father?" "It's not a joke, Chloe," I smiled, a cool, terrifying expression. "I just realized I have a taste for the real thing, not the cheap imitation. Congratulations on your engagement. I hope Julian's dwindling savings account can afford the catering." Julian stepped forward, his face flushed with rage and humiliation. "You're doing this to spite me, both of you. You cut me off, Dad, and now you're parading my ex-fiancé around?" Nico's eyes went dead. The air around him seemed to drop by 10 degrees. He stepped slightly in front of me, a protective shield of pure menace. "You do not raise your voice to her, Julian. You are nothing but a disappointment to the Lombardi name. You traded a diamond for costume jewelry." Nico looked at Chloe with absolute disdain. "Enjoy the party. It is the last one you will ever throw using my family's reputation." We didn't stay for a drink. We turned and walked out, leaving Julian and Chloe drowning in the wreckage of their own fragile egos. As the valet brought the car around, Nico pulled me into his arms under the awning of the hotel. "You handled that like a queen," he murmured, his hands tracing the bare skin of my back. "I had a good king standing beside me," I whispered. Nico didn't hesitate anymore. He leaned down and kissed me. It wasn't the tentative, selfish kisses Julian used to give. This was a kiss of fire and absolute possession, a promise that I belonged to him and he belonged to me. In the shadows of the city he ruled, I had finally found my light. A wounded animal is a dangerous animal, and Julian was bleeding out financially and socially. By the 8th month of my relationship with Nico, my life had transformed completely. I was thriving as the lead architect of the Lombardi development group, and behind closed doors, Nico and I had built a profound, unbreakable bond. He was fiercely protective, endlessly supportive, and deeply passionate. He treated me with a reverence that healed every scar Julian had ever left. But peace in the Mafia underworld is always an illusion. Desperate for cash and eager to overthrow the father who had exiled him, Julian made the most fatal mistake of his life. He reached out to the Moretti family, Nico's oldest and most violent rivals. Julian offered them insider knowledge of Nico's legitimate shipping routes and security protocols in exchange for a seat at their table and the funds to keep Chloe happy. We found out on a Tuesday. I was in Nico's study, going over blueprints, when Marco, Nico's head of security, burst into the room. His face was grim, his suit jacket open to reveal the holster at his side. "Boss." "We have a problem," Marco said, glancing briefly at me. "Julian sold out the harbor shipments. The Morettus ambushed our men. 3 dead. The cargo is gone." Nico didn't shout. He didn't throw things. A cold, terrifying stillness settled over him. He slowly set down his pen and stood up. The man I loved vanished, replaced entirely by the ruthless Don of the Lombardi syndicate. "Get the men ready," Nico ordered, his voice devoid of all warmth. "Lock down the estate. No one gets in or out." Marco nodded and sprinted out of the room. Nico turned to me, his expression softening just a fraction. He crossed the room, taking my face in his hands. "Aurora, I need you to go to the safe room. Marco will escort you. This is going to get ugly, and I will not risk you." "I'm not hiding in a bunker, Nico," I said firmly, grasping his wrists. "I know the harbor blueprints. I designed the new security gates. I can help you locate where they breached. It's too dangerous." "I am a Lombardi now, in everything but name," I interrupted, staring fiercely into his eyes. "You don't hide your queen when the board is attacked. You let her play." A flicker of intense pride cut through his anger. He kissed me hard. "Show me the blueprints." For the next 4 hours, the estate was a war room. I worked alongside Nico's men, identifying the blind spots in the harbor's architecture that Julian had exploited. Using my knowledge, Nico orchestrated a flawless counterattack. By midnight, the stolen cargo was recovered, and the Moretti captains responsible were dealt with permanently. But the true betrayal still lingered. Julian. The next morning, Nico's men dragged Julian into the massive, empty warehouse by the docks. I stood beside Nico, wrapped in a heavy wool coat against the biting cold, watching as Julian was thrown to his knees. He looked pathetic. His designer clothes were torn, his face pale and bruised. "Dad, please," Julian sobbed, looking up at the cold, monolithic figure of his father. "They forced me. They threatened Chloe." "Do not lie to me, boy," Nico's voice boomed, echoing off the high ceilings. "You sold out your family's blood for money. You got 3 of my men killed because you are weak and greedy." "I'm your son," Julian screamed, tears streaming down his face. Nico pulled a heavy silver revolver from his coat. The sound of the hammer clicking back was deafening in the quiet warehouse. Julian shrieked, pressing his face to the concrete floor. "You were my son," Nico said, aiming the weapon at the back of Julian's head. I placed a gentle hand on Nico's arm. I knew Nico had to maintain his authority in front of his men, but I also knew killing his own flesh and blood would leave a rot in his soul that he would never recover from. "Nico," I whispered softly, just for him. "Death is too easy for him. Let him live with nothing. Let him be a ghost." Nico held the gun steady for 10 agonizing seconds. Slowly, he lowered the weapon. He looked down at the sniveling mess on the floor with absolute disgust. "You are stripped of the Lombardi name. You are stripped of your citizenship in this city. You have 24 hours to leave the country. If my men ever see your face, or the face of that woman you are with, on my streets again, I will not hesitate a second time. Get out of my sight." Julian scrambled to his feet and ran into the morning fog, a broken, banished man. 2 years later, the sun was setting over the Amalfi coast, casting a brilliant, fiery glow over the private terrace of our villa. I leaned against the marble balcony, sipping a glass of vintage red wine, the heavy, flawless diamond on my left hand catching the fading light. It wasn't the old Lombardi heirloom. That ring had been melted down. This was a new stone, hand-selected by Nico, forged for the new era of our family. We had been married for a year. The wedding had been a private, highly secured affair in Sicily, completely hidden from the prying eyes of the press. I was no longer just the architect. I was Mrs. Aurora Lombardi, the undisputed matriarch of the family. Together, Nico and I had legitimized 80% of the family's assets. The underworld still feared him, but the corporate world now bowed to us both. As for my sister, the universe has a funny way of balancing the scales. Without the Lombardi wealth and protection, Julian's life spiraled. They fled to South America, but a spoiled boy with no work ethic cannot suddenly become a provider. A few months ago, I received a frantic, desperate voicemail from Chloe. She was crying, begging for a loan. She told me Julian was heavily in debt to the wrong people, that they were living in a squalid apartment, that she had made a terrible mistake. She played the "We Are Blood" card, pleading for her big sister to save her. I listened to the entire voicemail, my expression impassive. Then, I deleted it and blocked the number. Some bridges are burned by choice. Others are burned out of necessity. Chloe had made her bed literally and figuratively. She stole a man she thought was a prize, only to realize she had won a useless pawn. She wanted my life, but she lacked the character, the resilience, and the loyalty required to actually build it. Strong arms wrapped around my waist from behind, pulling me flush against a solid, warm chest. Nico rested his chin on my shoulder, his breath tickling my neck. "What is my beautiful wife thinking about?" he murmured, pressing a soft kiss to my skin. "Just reflecting on the past," I said, leaning back into his embrace, feeling the steady, powerful rhythm of his heart, thinking about how a single moment of betrayal led me to the greatest victory of my life. Nico turned me around, his dark eyes filled with an intensity that had never waned since the day we met. "They were fools who played a child's game," he said, brushing a stray lock of hair behind my ear. "You and I, we built an empire. You are my queen, Aurora. Today, tomorrow, and until the day I die. And you are my king." I smiled, wrapping my arms around his neck. As he kissed me beneath the Italian sunset, I knew I had won. Not by seeking petty revenge, but by elevating myself above the dirt they had tried to bury me in. They tried to break me, but all they did was hand me the crown. Thank you so much for watching this incredible story of betrayal, resilience, and ultimate redemption. Aurora's journey proves that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the universe clearing the path for something far greater. Never let the toxic actions of others strip away your dignity, because your true worth will always attract exactly what you deserve. If you loved this story, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own power, and subscribe to our channel for more intense, real-life drama fiction stories. Ring the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Let us know in the comments, what would you have done in Aurora's shoes? See you in the next video.